Welcome back to Top of Mind. My name is Hayley and I am your host. Today we are doing a solo episode, and we're doing a solo episode on lessons that I have learned in business in the last 4 years. My business turned 4 a couple of weeks ago, which was really exciting, but it also forced me to think about some of the big lessons that I've learned. Now, I'm going to be really honest with you guys. This podcast has taken me ages to film, and the reason why is because I'm kind of hung up on this idea of giving advice as a business owner, because I've only had a business for 4 years and I've had my other business for a couple of years. And it doesn't make me an expert in business, but I'm an expert in my experience. And one of the things that we talk about all the time within my business, Gambit Collective, is that you don't have to be an expert at the subject matter that you're talking about, but you have to talk from your experience. And I think that's really important for me to remind myself of that, because whilst I haven't had a business for 10 plus years, I've been working in businesses for many years, and I have had my own 2 businesses now for 4 years and 2 years respectively. And I think that that's really important to start this podcast with, is that I'm not an expert in business, but I have done it for the last 4 years. And I think one of the best ways that you learn is by doing. So I really want to use this episode today to share some of the lessons that I've learned in the last 4 years and briefly reflect on how far I've come over the last 4 years. I think the reality of what I thought owning a business would be and what it is are 2 very different things. And I think, honestly, I wouldn't have changed anything over the last 4 years. I think there's definitely some huge mindset shifts that I've had to undergo over the last 4 years. But I think that for anyone in business, either looking at starting one or in business and currently going through the trenches, I really hope that this podcast can either help or help shift some of the perhaps ruts or holes that you feel like you've landed in. Or just give you a different bit of a different perspective on what you're currently going through. So today I'm going to share with you 4 business lessons that I've learned over the last 4 years. I thought going with the 4 trend was a good thing to do. And honestly, if you had told me where I would be today 4 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you, because I didn't really have a plan when I started. And I think that was both the biggest blessing, the biggest lesson, but I definitely don't think it was a curse, because not having a plan allowed me to just follow my gut with what was working, as opposed to having a really rigid outline of what the next 12, 24, 36 months looked like. So looking back 4 years ago, I'm really proud of where I've got to with the business. It doesn't mean that I'm gonna stop dreaming of what I want and what I want to achieve, but I think there's a real power in being able to be content and happy with where you're at now, but also striving for what you want and what you want to achieve and what goals you have, and those 2 things can coexist. And I think as business owners in particular, or leaders of organizations, those 2 things seem to somewhat exist as a mutually exclusive. Like, you can't be content with where you're at if you want to achieve more, and you can't settle. And I think that for me, when I look at it, I'm like, no, I'm really happy with where I'm at right now, but that doesn't mean that I don't have huge goals for where I want to be. Anyway, enough of me rambling. I'm going to get into the first lesson, and I've made some notes on my laptop so that I stay on track. But the first lesson that I had in business was the mistake that I made was saying yes to everything. I think one of the things that I have grown to learn is that I can very deeply appreciate that I am a people pleaser at heart, and I want to keep everybody happy and please everybody, and sometimes that comes at a cost or a detriment to my own happiness or mental health or balance in life. So I think one of the things that I've learned over the last 4 years has certainly been that no is a full sentence. I think sometimes turning down an opportunity because it doesn't align with what you're wanting to do, or it doesn't align with what your business does, or it doesn't align because the budget isn't right, saying yes to things won't make your business more successful. It will actually damage your business in the long term. And I definitely fell victim to that in the first year or two of running my business. I've also seen other businesses fall into the trap of being able to do everything. And I think that businesses that can do everything, or say that they do everything, is a bit of a trap, because there's that saying, you know, a jack of all trades but a master of none. And yes, I know the saying goes on to say it's better than a master of none or something like that, but a jack of all trades is a master of none. And when you're working, especially in our industry, you want to work with people that know what they're doing. So I think I've seen a lot of businesses go down the path of wanting to keep all of the work in their own little remit, but actually learning to say, hey, we don't do that, but we know someone that does, and referring them out. Or, you know, we don't do that in-house, but we have a specialist that we work with, and we can work with them and you to create this, actually gains you a lot more respect and a lot more trust than saying that you can do it and actually butchering the job, or not doing or delivering on the job in the first place. So no is a full sentence is my first lesson. I think in the same way of saying yes to everything work-wise, saying yes to everything in your personal life or everything else outside of business can also be really detrimental. I think over time you realize that saying yes to the things that don't fill your cup drains the time and energy and effort that you want to put into the things that you do enjoy doing. One of the greatest analogies that I share with my friends all the time is the analogy of cups and jugs. And this typically comes into play more so in my personal life than it does professionally, but it can also work professionally. And I like to think of myself as a jug, right? And I have cups and jugs in my life, represented by other people in my life. And the thing is if I pour my jug into that cup, or into a cup in my life, I'm going to overfill them. And they're going to be so content and so happy and so full every time they engage with me. But when they pour their cup into my jug, it doesn't even fill it to the top, because I'm a jug. And so sometimes you have to be able to recognize the cups and jugs in your life, and you have to be able to recognize whether you're a cup or you're a jug. And that takes a lot of self-awareness. I am aware of that. But what I have noticed is that there are cups and there are jugs of people in my life. I am typically somebody that gives a lot more, and therefore I am a jug, as one of the characteristics of being a jug. And so being able to identify those cups and jugs in your life where you can go, you know what, I'm going to pour into that person and they're going to overflow because they're a cup, but when they give everything that they can back to me, it's still not going to be satisfying, or it's still not going to fill my jug. That's what I think you have to be aware of. And the whole idea of filling your time outside of work can be super draining, especially when you're building a business, especially when every hour in business hours or during the week or when you're working, you are on and you are doing stuff and you're engaging with people. Learning to have time for yourself and time alone can be the biggest cup filler of them all. So I feel like there's kind of two parts to this lesson. The first is obviously saying yes to jobs, projects, clients that don't align with your business can actually be more detrimental to the business. But in the same breath, saying yes to hanging out with people or spending time with people or groups that don't fill your cup or your jug can be equally as draining and then leave you feeling more drained after the weekend than perhaps when you went into it. I'm quickly interrupting this podcast episode because I just want to remind you that in order for us to stay top of mind, see what I did there? We need you to hit like and subscribe or share this with a friend. Give them a little bit of marketing inspiration or business inspiration today. Now back to the episode. I think the last thing that I'll talk about on this saying yes to everything is discounts. I think when I fell into my business and starting working with amazing clients, you want to work with these amazing clients. So you're like, oh, I'm happy to discount my prices because you think that that's going to make you more appealing. And I think with that in mind, I've learned that actually discounting your prices not only makes you less valuable to that person, but it also sets a really bad habit and I suppose cadence for working with that particular client because they're always going to expect a discount. Now, I could do an entire episode on discounts and why I hate them and why I don't think that you should do them. But put simply, discounting for projects not only sets a really bad habit for that client that you're working with because they're always going to expect it and it's a slippery slope down from there. But there's that analogy of the water bottle that costs $2 at the supermarket, $6 in a gym, $9 on an aeroplane. And the thing becomes more valuable depending on the environment that it's in. And that's exactly how you should look at your services or your business. If people are asking for discounts, you're in the wrong environment. You're working with the wrong type of client that doesn't value the skill set or the product that you're offering. So no matter whether you discount it or not, they're still not going to appreciate the value that you bring, regardless of whether there's a discount there or not. So that's lesson number one. I learned to say no to things and I stopped saying yes to everything. Lesson number two is your biggest amplifier is your network. And I think that became really clear for me really early on. I've been lucky enough to grow my business to 100% inbound business off the back of my Instagram and LinkedIn. And that's because of the network that I have. I think one of the big reminders of this was when I spoke at South by Southwest last October, and the panel that I was able to form came from the network that I had built. And I'm gonna set it out for you. So that year, International Women's Day, I hosted a panel. On that panel, Lauren Meisner was one of the guests that I was emceeing or interviewing. I then reached out to her afterwards and said I'd love to catch up, and she ended up coming onto the podcast. And in October, I then also reached out to her and said, did you want to form this panel with me for South by Southwest? Is it something that you're interested in? So that was my first guest on my panel for South by Southwest, was met through another panel that I was asked to do many months earlier. The second guest on that panel was Sophie Hood. She's the founder of Soul Tonic and she's doing incredible things. I'm pretty sure she's moving to New York today. Anyway, Sophie was introduced to me by someone that works with us. And then she turned around to me and said, I feel like you and Soph would just get along. You're very similar. You're very like-minded. She's like, do you mind if I intro you? I was like, sure. And I met Sophie. We caught up on Zoom or a Google Meet. And instantly we clicked. And I also then asked her to be a guest on the podcast, to which she joined me, and that was an amazing episode. And then I reached out to her in October and said, hey, I've been given this opportunity to build a panel at South by Southwest. They want me to speak, but they want it to be a panel. Do you want to join? And she said yes. So she joined me. And then last but not least, we needed a male moderator, because you can't just have a panel full of women. I needed a male moderator who was great at what he did. And unfortunately, my network now consists mainly of incredible women, which is an incredible thing, because 10 years ago, I did not have a network of incredible women that I could lean on. And so it was through a conversation that I was having with a friend of mine at a cafe, and I said, oh, I'm looking for a male moderator who knows our space, who knows what we do. And she goes, oh, I'll introduce you to this guy. He has a great podcast. He runs an amazing business. His name is Mal. And then I reached out to Mal, jumped on a Google Meet with him, and asked him to moderate this panel that I had designed. And that's how that panel discussion came together, through the power of networking. And most importantly, like in-person networking. I think nowadays people rely so heavily on digital platforms that they forget about the in-person and the power of in-person networking. And so for me, it was a big reminder when I was reflecting on the lessons that I've learned over the last 4 years, that in-person branding and building your personal brand in person as well as online is the biggest superpower. I think obviously building my personal brand over the last few years on LinkedIn and Instagram has been a constant kind of, it has been something that is so consistent that people now associate that with me. So LinkedIn content, people are like, oh, if you want, if you want help with LinkedIn, reach out to Hayley. And that's obviously now something that we offer as a service within our business. But also talking consistently about pay-as-you-go marketing, personal branding, social media, content creation, experiences. They're the things, and that is the reason that I am able to continue to grow my business, is because I'm driving home that personal branding message online, but then I'm also following through with in-person meetups and catch-ups where relevant. I think it really got me thinking, and I think in 2025, one of my goals is to meet as many business owners and leaders in person and just connect, not for any other reason. I don't have an ulterior motive. I don't want your business. I just want to meet you, understand what you're trying to do. And if there are synergies there with the business, great. But I think for 2025, one of my big goals within business is to meet as many business owners and leaders as I can. So if you're a business owner or leader and you're listening or watching, reach out, send me a message, send me an email. All of our contact details are in the show notes, because I would love to get to know you and your business a little bit better. And that's lesson number 2. So lesson number 2 was that my network is my biggest amplifier. All right, lesson number 3, comparing myself to other businesses. Honestly, I think that's why it took me so long to record this podcast, because as I said at the beginning of this episode, I was just like, who's going to want to listen to this? What advice can I give to somebody? I've only been in business for 4 years. But I think that with the amount of messages and DMs and emails that I get on a weekly basis asking me for advice, that makes me the perfect person to share my experience on the last 4 years in business. So I think one of the biggest lessons or mistakes that I made early on was comparing myself to other businesses. And I think in the first couple of years, I was chasing a big client base, a huge team, a massive office, and hundreds of people working for me. And I regularly do some self-reflection on the business. Every quarter I try and take myself away for a day or a couple of days and really deeply reflect on where we're at, what the next 3 to 6 months look like, and if I'm kind of staying true to what I initially started with or what my goal was initially. And I think that that's really important because it not only allows you to like do a little bit of a pulse check and see if, you know, what you're doing is actually working, but it also allows you to check in and go, is this really what I want? And interrogate why you're doing the things that you're doing, or why you're chasing the jobs that you're chasing, or why you have the goals that you have. So for me, I think it was the end of year 2 in business that I realized that I didn't want a huge business in terms of people or scale. I wanted a quality business. And I think there's a lot of businesses that are out there, especially in, you know, the Instagram space, and constantly talking about, you know, scaling quickly and taking over the world and building $1 million businesses and blah, blah, blah. But for me, if I scale quickly, I lose quality. And that's not something that I'm willing to compromise on. So for me, one thing that I've realized over the last 4 years is sticking to doing things my way and the way that I set out when I started the business is my superpower. And I think this t-shirt is a really important reminder of that. When we turned 4, I was like, what's something that we can do that's, you know, helpful or aligns with what we do or our values and things like that. And we always run a free workshop, you know, to help as many people as we can. And I was very grateful that we had over 90 people subscribe to our free event a couple of weeks ago. But these t-shirts came off the back of an idea of the fact that my team and I regularly live in oversized t-shirts. Whether I'm at home working, whether I'm in the office, I wear it with a pair of jeans or a skirt, I'm always in oversized t-shirts. They are my comfort, but they're also us. So I was like, what better way to celebrate 4 years in business than creating our own tees? It says, "It's your move," which is our tagline. And it's a really cool reminder that you have to make the first move, and the first move, the power is yours to make the first move. And it just was something that really aligned with me, with my business, with my team, with my clients. And now I have people sliding into our DMs being like, how do I get one of those? Or are you selling them? And we just really don't know what to do because no, we're not selling them, but like, should we? Because they're cool and I love them and I live in them. Maybe we can create some cool t-shirts that are, you know, they just embody us. And I think comparing yourself to other businesses can be the biggest mistake you'll make. One of the things that I say to our clients all the time is, if you are looking at your competitors, you're already one step behind. And the reason is because your competitors are delivering for your customers, right? And if we're looking at other businesses, or if I'm looking at other businesses going, oh, well, that's how they did it, I'm really losing sight of who I'm delivering this for. And that's for our clients. So ultimately, making sure that you're aligned with why you started in the first place. And that's okay if that changes over time. But staying true to yourself, aligned with your values, aligned with what your business does, not everybody else's, is probably one of the biggest lessons I learned in the last 4 years. So being really true to yourself, don't compare yourself to other people. And I think that's something that I constantly remind myself of. And especially with these t-shirts now, it's a really nice reminder to wear and just have that in the back of my mind. If you are loving this episode, don't forget to leave a comment or hit that subscribe button. You have no idea how much it means for podcasters like me to get a like or subscribe, because it means that we can get better guests and we can get into more ears of people to help talk to them about marketing, social media, and personal branding. Now back to the episode. So that's lesson 3, comparing yourself to other businesses. Don't do it. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of energy, and we only have a finite amount of energy in our days. So lesson number 4, this is my 4th lesson, but I think the 4th lesson that I learned was learning to move fast and fail fast. And what I mean by that is making a decision quickly and figuring it out and making a call if it's working or not quicker is the biggest power or superpower that you can have in business. There's this psychological theory called the sunk cost fallacy, and if you've not heard of it, it's essentially the tendency to continue with something that you've invested money or time or effort into, even if the cost outweighs the benefits. And an example of this is, has anyone ever watched a movie and they've got maybe 3 to 10 minutes into it and they're like, not really for me, or they've got halfway into it and they're like, it's not really me, but I've already watched half of it, I may as well finish it. And if that's you, that is the sunk cost fallacy in action. It's continuing to do something even though the cost outweighs the benefit. And I think I learned this a number of ways, but I think one story that really pops up for me is the story of working with a supplier on a particular job that we were doing. We'd bought this supplier in to deliver a particular piece of business, and we were working with this client on a bunch of other things, and then we had this one supplier working on one thing. And there were a couple of red flags really early in the supplier process of working with them, in that they weren't very quick at getting back to us, and a couple of things that they said raised some concerns for us, but we kind of didn't ignore them, but we kind of pushed them aside because we needed to work with this particular supplier. And the moment I saw that supplier drop the ball, I made a decision to remove that supplier from the project and replace that supplier with a different supplier. And I had to explain that to the client, and I felt like an idiot because it was essentially my mistake of putting someone in there who wasn't equipped to do the job. And that can suck, saying that out loud. But by me making that quick decision, yes, I had to pay the supplier for their time, and I didn't ask my client to pay any more money. And yes, I lost money on that particular part of the project, but we were able to deliver an amazing result for that client, where that client now continues to work with us. And I think sometimes we can get so caught up in making a decision because we're like, we don't have 100% of the facts, or we don't know for sure whether this is going to work or not. And I think one thing that really sticks with me was Barack Obama talks about decision making, and he talks about the fact that you'll never have 100% certainty. And he talks about some key decisions that he had to make during his time in office. And he says that if you can get to 51% certainty with the facts that you have available to you at that time of making the decision, you know the most to make a decision at that current point in time. And making a decision faster is better than waiting to make the decision, because you're essentially just prolonging the cost that it is going to have, or the impact that it is going to have in the long run. So I think one of the things that I was able to learn really quickly was that move fast, make decisions quickly, fail fast, or figure out whether it's working or not fast, because then you can quickly pivot or adapt or change to ensure that you're not going to make that decision again. But the longer that you take to make that decision, it's going to cost you more, and it's going to impact the business more. So that was definitely my 4th lesson that I learned in business so far, and that is learning to move fast and fail fast. Being adaptable and willing to pivot can save you time, money, and energy. And also just the reminder that you'll never have 100% certainty. You're allowed to outgrow the old vision of your business, but do it in a way that allows you to constantly evolve and change. And moving fast allows you to stay in check and stay on trend, or, you know, keep that pulse check of what your clients and your consumers want and need. But if you're not moving fast enough and making decisions fast enough, you'll be left behind. So move fast, fail fast, learn faster, and you'll find that your business will grow so much more with that mentality than the mentality of being paralyzed to make a decision because you're scared of the outcome, or you just want to see how this goes, or you've already invested X amount of hours or money or time into this thing. So don't let the sunk cost fallacy catch you out in business. Just because you have invested time, money, energy into something doesn't mean it's always going to work. And I think that is the best lesson to end on. I do have some rapid fire questions that I've asked my family, friends, colleagues, employees, etc. to write for me. And I'm going to quickly go through those. I actually haven't spent much time looking at them. So first bonus rapid fire question is the best decision I've made in business in the last 4 years. The best decision that I've made in business in the last 4 years is to stop trying to follow in everyone else's footsteps and really carve my own path of what business looks like and how we do things. I think that's fundamentally why Gambit Collective was born, was to do marketing differently. And we're a pay-as-you-go marketing agency for that very reason. We don't want to do things the same way. So I think the best decision I've made so far is just constantly continuing to follow my gut and trust myself. Yeah. Okay, second question is a mistake that you're grateful for. A mistake that I am grateful for would have to be like a financial mistakes. So like forgetting to invoice a client, or forgetting to pay a tax bill on time. They're all mistakes that I'm super grateful for because they're things that I'm now highly aware of in business. And I think that that's one of the best ways to learn, is to make the mistake and you'll never make it again, because once you've made that big mistake, you'll never make it again because it hurt the first time. A mantra that I live by now is the next bonus question. A mantra that I live, there's so many quotes that I live by. I think the one that I repeat as often as I do is done is better than perfect. And I think that quote, that mantra, is what got me in the chair today to record this podcast, because I was like, what am I going to talk about? Who cares about my lessons, etc. So I think done is better than perfect, and putting something out there quickly and learning from it is better than not doing it at all. What is a belief you had about business that turned out to be totally wrong? That I'd have more time in my day or my week, and I couldn't be further from the truth. I think there's a lot of misconception in business about flexibility and freeing up your time or your week. And I think that people wrongly associate starting a business with having more time back, and you actually have less time than you ever did before, but you certainly have a lot more flexibility in how you do that. So I think that that's probably one of the big misconceptions that turned out to be totally wrong. And I tell people, anyone that will listen, like, do not start a business and expect to have more time in your week, because it's just not a thing. If you could tell yourself one thing on day one of starting your business, what would it be? Honestly, it would be back yourself. And it's something that I would tell my younger self too, is just back yourself and stick to you. Don't try and follow what anyone else is doing. Stick to what you're good at. Stick to what you started out to do, because that will be your biggest superpower, is one thing that I would tell myself on day one of starting my business. Proudest moment so far. There's so many. There's so many proud moments. Honestly, it's a handful of proud moments would be obviously getting to speak at South by Southwest in Sydney last year was a huge highlight personally for me. I think working with incredible brands. This year we get to work with TikTok. Last year, we worked with Formula One and Red Bull and Armour All. Earlier this year, we worked with some amazing marketing agencies and global brands. Last year, like banks in the top 4. I think those kinds of things make me really proud, but also proud that we're just still going at 4 years. I think the stat that lives with me rent-free in my head is around, 90-something% of businesses fail in the first 2 years. And I think that the fact that we're still going at 4 is a testament to just sticking to what we're good at and doing what we do well. And that's something that I'm really proud of. All right, last question for the bonus round. What is one underrated skill that has helped you succeed? One underrated skill. Honestly, it would be talking to anybody. I think I have the ability, like my dad would always say, I could talk under wet cement. And it's because I have this ability that I'm like naturally curious about people, and I want to learn about people, and I want to get to know people. And that is for no other reason other than because I'm curious about that person. So I think for me, an underrated skill that's helped me succeed so far is honestly just talking to anyone and everybody, asking them what they're doing, telling them about what we're doing. And so I just think get comfortable having those uncomfortable moments or conversations, because you don't know where, your next piece of business or your next opportunity will come from. And I think that's a really good place to wrap it up. That is the 4 lessons in 4 years in business episode. It is finally done and I can breathe and not put it off any longer. If you guys have any questions, all of these solo episodes that I'm going to be doing are going to be based on the questions that you have. So if you have any questions, feel free to DM us or send us an email. If you're listening on Spotify or watching on Spotify or YouTube, feel free to leave it in the comments, because we're constantly going through the comments and pulling out the questions that we can answer in these podcasts. As always, if you liked this episode or you loved this episode, feel free to share it with your friends, your family members, your colleagues. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because you don't realize how much those things can help a podcast like ours. We're really grateful to be in the top 10% of video podcasts last year in Australia, which is wild because it was our first year in podcasting. But you don't realize how much a subscription or a like or a follow or a share can actually lead to more people hearing about you, more people wanting to be a podcast guest, etc. So if you have any questions, leave them for us in the comments or DM us or email us directly. If you learned something today that really resonated with you, I'd love to chat to you. I'd love to hear from you. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're a business leader or a business owner, I would love to meet you. That's my goal for 2025, is to meet as many business owners and leaders as possible. And that's all. Thank you for listening. And I cannot wait to see you in our next episode.